if I know I'm going to be interrupted, I won't get into that headspace. If somebody messages me and says, hey, elbows me, I will absolutely say, go away. I'll get you later when I have the cycles for it. But often what happens is, that thing that I set aside 3 hours to do took 25 minutes, because once you have the mental space for it, problems solve themselves.
From Tuple, this is Distributed, where we show how world-class engineers and their teams tackle the challenges of remote work. I'm Jack Hanna, your host. Hey everyone. In this conversation, I chat with Jesse Wilson, the prolific open source developer. Jesse spent the past 13 years at Cash App, having previously worked at Google, and if you work in the Java or Android ecosystems, it's very likely you've touched his work. Jesse was a key contributor to Okio, a modern I/O library for Android, Java, and Kotlin multi-platform, downloaded over 50 billion times. He was a contributor to OKHTTP, to Juice, to Guava, and so many more. Jesse also shares his thoughts, both technical and non-technical, in essay form on publicobject.com, and he's just this really thoughtful guy and big believer in prioritizing the fun in work. And so we had a lot to talk about. We covered when it's worth doing the really, really big, hard software project, including some examples from Jesse's own career. We talk about how the lack of interruptions are actually killing teams' productivity, and why face-to-face meetings without a whiteboard are just wrong. There are so many tactical nuggets to take from this conversation, and if you're in the Java or Android communities in particular, you'll certainly enjoy the lore. This conversation was a great one, and I hope you get as much out of it as I did. Jesse, when doing any software project, you obviously want to be nimble, you want to be able to steer quickly, and I think the consequence of that for so many folks is to avoid bigger, scarier projects. It's my understanding you think that's a trap. You told me, in fact, one thing core to your being is that there's so many projects that doing the thing that takes a ton of grinding is actually worth that amount of work. And so I'd love to better understand your position here.
All right, so I'll go into an anecdote. I was just talking to one of my buddies about something that sort of fits this shape. Jake and I are working on this UI system, and there's this change that we've been putting off because there's sort of like a hacky way to do it, and there's a good way to do it. And we both kind of thought that the hacky way of doing it was going to be faster, and that the good way of doing it was going to require us to do too much work. And so I'm talking to him, and he's like, I'm going to start into the thing, but it's going to be slow going because I'm busy, and I'd like to do it the right way, but I don't have time for doing it the right way. And I talk to him, and I'm like, but if you do it the right way, it'll be fun, right? And he's like, yeah, it'll be fun. I want to do it the right way. I don't want to hack this stuff together. And I'm like, and if it's fun, it'll be faster, right? And he's like, well, because every minute of doing it the hacky way feels like I'm going the wrong way, and it's slow, and it's not fun. I'm not engaged. But if I do it the right way, I feel like I'm being creative and I'm building, and it'll take a long time, but the whole time will whiz by, and I'll catch myself working at 11 o'clock at night on the thing because it's drawing me in.
Sure.
And we're like, why the hell did we think about doing it the shortcut way? And this is a pretty exotic project, but I feel like it's representative. And I don't know, everywhere that I work, I see people saying we have to do things the quick and bad way because of deadlines, or we have to do things the quick and bad way because because we got some other priority. And it's the quick and bad way is going to feel bad, and the doing it right, building things sort of foundationally in layers feels good. And I feel I don't know, when we're building software, it's got to be fun.
Do you have any particularly crazy or interesting stories of when you decided to do that really hard thing, or decided not to, and it sort of blew up on you, that helped you develop that gut feeling?
Yeah, I mean, the project that I've done that's had the biggest impact in the world, we did this library called Okio 10 years ago, and I didn't want to do it because we were building a networking library, and we needed something more foundational to build our networking library on. We'd been building it on the Java networking library called Java I/O. And if you spend enough time with that thing, it's unpleasant because it doesn't compose very well. and it's like, do we really want to build our own networking library? Do we want to build our own IO library? And the problem was, it was like, we can't build layer 2 on top of this like craggy, crumbly layer beneath. And eventually I convinced myself that like we should build the layer beneath what we were targeting. Like the actual product was, doing something on the I'll say layer 2 as if these layers have names or a meaning, but like we built the thing beneath sort of regretfully and shamefully, like, I don't really belong here. This isn't some problem I should be solving, but if I want to build the thing I want to build correctly, I have to build it on a solid foundation. And so we built that solid foundation, and like, duh, everybody else in the world also needed a solid foundation to build their stuff, and so it was wildly successful. But it felt at the time like we were playing outside of our responsibility. We were doing something we shouldn't be doing because it was not our responsibility to solve that problem. It was somebody else's. And despite the fact that they did a bad job of it, we're stuck with it. That was the one where it ended really well. I also have lots of stories where it's ended less well.
Yeah, well, ended really well, I think, is an understatement. It's been downloaded over 50 billion times, I think. So obviously that's had a pretty impactful outcome for the entire ecosystem, for that matter. Did you have a hard time getting other people on board with that? I have to imagine that because you were, in a way, swimming outside your lane, or like regretfully doing something that was outside of the core of what you were trying to do, that somebody on the team or in management even would have pushed back on you.
Yeah.
I'm curious about that.
I think that at the time, the company was sort of like technology forward enough and sort of like trusted the engineers enough that we would take those kinds of risks sort of like as culture. And I don't think that necessarily like, I think that was like a special place in time. And I don't know, like what I want most of all is to like seek out those sort of unique opportunities where you're in like like the fabled like Bell Labs environment where it's like the quarterly goals are not so aggressive that everybody has to scramble and every minute is accounted for like building a feature, and you can say, let's go build this thing. It will be hard. It will take 6 months. It will take a year. And the payoff will come, over the long term because we're building foundational things. Maybe that's why I want to work in like smaller, startup-y, ambitious companies. Just like it feels like if you've got that long-term business objective where you're not going quarter to quarter, you can start to make long-term technology calls. I would love to say that like this was the one trick that we told the boss and he said okay, but I think instead what we just had was we had a boss who was like, I trust you.
Yeah, I mean that's huge, and that was during your early days at Cash App. I think Google's fabled for having this culture too, where you were prior, and so it kind of makes sense that this is central to your point of view. For folks who aren't familiar with the library, could you just explain a little bit about what some of the more difficult or challenging parts of taking on this project might have been?
Yeah. So our problem was we're ultimately we want to like you want to tap your card at the coffee shop, and we need to take that card information, send it to ultimately like your bank through some series of cell phone networks and Wi-Fi networks and everything through our backend systems. And we want to make that as fast as it can possibly be. And so from the like mobile apps, we are sitting on top of like these 1990s network stacks. And the way that this stuff works is that you build James Gosling, the original Java guy. I think it was him or one of his like early teammates built the very first networking connection code in Java. That was like part of the old applets days for the graybeards who will remember those things. And that stuff worked and sort of like never got revisited again. And the industry really changed in the last, 30 years, where, I don't know, like things like unit testing didn't exist when Java was created. It's wild to think that unit testing is like newer than Java, but like there was unit testing as an idea, but it was not a part of the discipline. When I was in university, there was no course on unit testing, or there was no mention of unit testing in like the software engineering class, because it really hadn't been invented or popularized yet. And so just like all of these things were sort of like creaky, and our expectation for like performance was naive. Anyway, that's like the premise. So we're building on this like really sort of creaky old thing, and we want to make our super duper fast, tap your card, the transaction says approved as quickly as possible. And we're like, we want to build like a next generation networking stack. And so we want to do HTTP2, and then if you want to do HTTP2, you need like a whole bunch of other sophisticated things, because HTTP2 is a complicated beast. And so we end up saying like, okay, in order to build this component, we need this other component that doesn't exist. And we ended up, again, convincing ourselves that we should build it. But it's the same sort of thing as like building any sort of new foundational technology, where, and then like I say foundational technology, like it's something like it's a rocket ship, but really all we just wanted to do was solve our networking performance problems. And the challenge was being ambitious to go one level lower in the stack, and to say, we're not going to just sort of like take what's in the standard toolbox. We're going to be bold and build our own, to use like a construction metaphor. It's like, at some point you're like, these hammers are great, but what if we had like a nail gun? Yeah. Right? And like the invention of the nail gun is a thing. And so the person who invented the nail gun, presumably his or her boss was like, yo, what are you doing? Start hammering those nails. Stop playing with that, whatever it is, the air gun or whatever makes it possible.
Yeah. Which is like a totally different shape than a hammer, and like functions totally differently. And it's like this fundamentally different thing. Yeah. To put a point on its worthiness, or like why it was worth ultimately doing this, because I have to imagine like, OKIO took a really long time, and in a narrow scope of that project made things take longer, I would think, than building on the existing stack. And so like, why was it ultimately worth it in this case?
Yeah. I think that maybe I'll just continue to lean on this like nail gun abstraction, right? Which is like, if you, or even maybe like, sharpening the saw, the metaphor we love to use in software is like sharpen the saw. And this was a thing where it felt audacious to say, I'm not even going to just like sharpen the saw. I'm going to go invent a new sort of saw, something that solves the exact same problem as a tool I have in my toolbox, but that tool is chafing me, and I'm running into its limitations all the time. And so in terms of like selling it or taking the risk, it almost felt like, sort of getting back to what I was talking about before, it almost felt like that pit in the stomach thing, where it's like, I don't want to work in this layer, right? I don't want to like use that hammer that's giving me blisters all day and all night. I need to find a tool that better fits the problem I'm trying to solve with it.
Yeah. It reminds me of something I heard you talk about in a talk, I think from 2018, of like suppressed versus induced demand. Like when you take the time to make something really easy. Even if you're not doing that thing a lot today, the likelihood that you do it in the future is just way higher, because now it's easy. And the friction of it being hard before maybe prevented you from ever even considering leveraging this technology in that way. It sounds like that resonates with you.
I absolutely love that. And it's like, if you make like something cheap, it like becomes more accessible and more available. Flashlight's actually a fantastic one, where it's like, we used to have a flashlight. It was in the house. It always had dead batteries. And then somebody put a flashlight in my pocket, and I use that flashlight 15 times a day, right? Yeah. Like, I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember not having a flashlight on their person all the time. And what you do is just stumble around in the dark and stub your toe all the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great example. I think there's a lot of things like that. One thing that I think about a little bit that is kind of like a point of friction introduced by working remotely is like the reaching out and asking for help or interrupting somebody else,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
to shift
yeah.
gears a little bit and use that as a segue, like when you're in person and you're shoulder to shoulder with somebody else, the
Yep.
likelihood of you asking for help because there's so little friction of being like, yo, can you look at this for a second, help me think about this, is so low. You're just going to do it way more often. But in a remote context, you have all these barriers. We talked a little bit about this in the pre-interview that you would like to normalize interrupting people more. And so,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about why that speaks to you.
Yeah. So first off, I'll say I'm working from the office today.
Yeah, I
And
can see that.
I'm an office working person on a distributed podcast. So I am I'm special. But what I find coming into the office is you come in and you see Mike and you're like, "Hey, Mike, did you ride your bike today? Did you drive in? How's things?" And we get that like sort of small talk out of the way, and then when he wants to say like, "Hey, like, can you help me figure out why this test isn't passing?" He just like elbows me and we like immediately go. And I find the process of being interrupted in person absolutely delightful. I feel like that's like the fun part of this work. It's not like when the compiler says that like my test is green. It's like when the compiler says that like or the test says test is green. It's like when we work on it together and we have this like sense of shared accomplishment. And once you have that sort of like, I can interrupt people and suddenly we're in a multiplayer game. I want to do that even with all my colleagues who do not work in the office, which is 99.9% of them. And so what I want to get to the point of is I have a problem with the thing and I say, I really want Jake's help with this. I just want to like push the button and Jake's thing to say, Jesse's trying to elbow you. Jesse says, yo, you there? And I feel like, 50% of the time he'll press the hang up button and signal, I'm not interested right now. And I'm 100% okay with that. Or he'll say like, I was just reading email. Let's like dig in. What's up? And that like spontaneous collaboration, I think is like for me is like the joy of the work, right? It's like building the things is its own sense of satisfaction, but teamwork is actually fulfilling in a different way. And so first of all, I want other people to push the like, tuple you, Jesse, interrupt me. And I want them to do that so that we can have that opportunity to like teamwork. And like, I feel like that's almost like a gift. Like, hey, I've got this problem, let's solve this together. And I know that there's like a ton of people with a ton of things to say, like, don't interrupt me in flow state. And
Sure.
I love that. And I like press like the don't answer call button all the time when I'm there. So I don't think that like interrupting people should be sort of like unconditional. I'm calling you. I want to interrupt you. Stop what you're doing. The server's on fire. Instead, what I want is like a social convention of like, you got a minute? And if that social convention of you got a minute is something that we normalize, then I have a lot more fun like trying to solve my problems. I literally think that it's like optimizing for fun, which is again not a business purpose, but also sort of like part of the work should be building stuff together. And you'll get unblocked faster, and maybe you'll like teach each other things, but that's like a side benefit.
Yeah, totally. So it sounds like for you, at least on a personal preference level,
Yeah.
you get or derive more satisfaction and fulfillment from that shared accomplishment, doing things together, not just getting the test to be green, but the process of getting it there with somebody else is a source of great satisfaction for you personally.
And like, I don't know, like we look at how we do our, employee performance review nonsense. And is it like Joe, who I've never seen in person, glowing review. Joe always reviews my pull requests quickly, right? Like I can imagine myself typing in the box that says like, is Joe a great employee for a corporation, and saying like, well, this test passed and he broke the build only one time in the last 6 months. Whereas like if my relationship is like, Joe messaged me and was like, dude, this thing is broken. It doesn't make any sense. Let's like fix it together. Then we have that like sort of like journey relationship where we did something together, and maybe it takes 5 or 10 minutes. Like it doesn't have to be a big thing, but suddenly it's like a social experiment. And when we're talking to our manager and saying like, how did it go last week? I can say like, Joe was so solid. He helped me fix my bug. Or like Joe had no idea how this thing worked. We did it together. Now we both understand. And I know that like that thing is poorly documented. It needs to be easier to understand.
So it sounds like there is some meaningful business value to be gained from this type of thing, but I think it's pretty hard to do for 2 reasons. So I'd love to get your take on this. One is that inherent friction in a remote or distributed context that exists. I think folks using tuple, we try and eliminate some of that friction for you, but still there is an inherent increase in friction remotely than there would be in person when you can just elbow somebody. Yeah. So I think that's part of it. But then I think there's this other thing which is more insidious and subtle, which is that most companies have individual incentives, which is to say that promotions happen individually, not at the team level. Raises happen individually, not at the team level. And to all of those points, performance is basically just assessed as individuals and not as teams. And so how do you get around some of that to find the joy and to find the collaboration opportunities?
Yeah. I was trying. I will still be trying to make it so that tuple is installed by default on our computers. Or not quite there, but like it's again like when you go to like Google Meet or something with somebody you've never met with on the internet, you can just sort of assume they have a browser and they have a camera and you can just like chat, and it's like no thing. You just get a URL and a time and date, and you can Google Meet with each other. Tuple is more friction because I send people to tuple, join my call link, and they're like, this is only going to be 3 minutes and I don't have the software installed. Can we discuss it on chat? And I'm like, but I want you to install the software so that next time I can do it. Anyway, so yes, absolutely, there's friction there. And for me, I'm like the sort of squeaky wheel who's just like evangelizing this and pushing it on everybody because I want to be able to elbow them. And then the evaluation thing, again, I think that the hack is your company's either going to be saying like, you shipped 50,000 lines of code, Jeff shipped 30,000 lines of code, therefore you get a promotion and Jeff doesn't, which would be insane. Or they'll say, your coworkers think you're a great contributor, and they speak highly of you and they value your contributions. Like I think all of our ways of measuring our impact, a lot of it is like social, and a lot of it is like, again, Joe says, Jesse helped me, he unblocked my thing. And so I think that even if we're like full capitalist and we say everybody's evaluated 100% on their individual contributions, those individual contributions are not strictly the things you do on your own computer in your own like task queue. Those contributions are also, the journey that we had together and helping other people solve their problems. And again, like if your company just says, we take the number of Jira tickets that you close and we multiply it by 1,000 and that's your salary, we might multiply it by 100, I don't know. but that would be one approach. But I think that like in practice, it's expected to be fuzzier. And I think that if we're sort of helping each other, it can still have that impact. I got this one guy, and him and I have a service that we operate together, and it's a microservice. It's important, but it's stable and it works. And we have a scheduled pairing once a week, where once a week for an hour, we go on tuple and we're like, what are we gonna fix from our queue today? And it's wonderful because even though this project would probably not get any attention otherwise, by having it scheduled and having the two of us there, we have this sort of like shared, almost like guilt to go and put an hour of improvement on the project. And that might be like, okay, let's update our dependencies or some sort of menial task like that. Or it could be, such and such a person said they wanted this metric on the page. Can we start reporting this metric, or can we start exposing this information, or can we improve the way that the permissions work? And those things would be, sort of at the bottom of some queue if it was either of us to do sort of like on demand. But because we have the sort of like dedicated once an hour a week, we just like get on, do it together. And I think it's really fun just because it's like this project, instead of just sort of like babysitting it, sort of feels like a fun group project from college.
Yeah. There's a couple of things that I want to talk about that you just brought up. One is this like difference between scheduled and unscheduled time. The other is like the benefits of pairing in contrast with maybe having a directly responsible individual, because it sounds like in this case there are some real benefits to it being a paired and shared responsibility as opposed to just a single DRI. Before I get to that, I want to summarize one of the points that you made, which is that basically, like, even if you go full capitalist and are only looking out for yourself and your career, what I'm hearing you say is that most companies evaluate performance based on social input, like the input from folks around you. And so the more that you can do as an individual to help the people around you, or to get help and have these shared journeys of success, the higher fidelity and the more meaning and emotion is going to be imbued in the reports that they provide about you to leadership.
Yeah.
And in that sense, your emotional, meaningful performance recommendation is going to come off totally different than the sterile example you gave before, where it's like,
Yeah.
Jill did this and that was great, period.
Yeah.
And so I think that's worth highlighting.
If I've got the same relationship with Jill as I have with Claude, I'm in big trouble.
Yeah. That puts a really fine point on it. Okay, so these two other topics that kind of surfaced from this was kind of the benefit of the scheduled time that you have together versus a kind of the ad hoc time that you were sort of describing beforehand, and the benefits of it being a shared responsibility versus kind of like a isolated thing that only one of you is stewarding. Which of those speaks to you more, and where should we start?
The piece I feel most strongly about is this thing is, again, it's like relatively low on my personal priorities. The thing works. It's a sort of thing where it needs some amount of the service that we maintain. But rather than sort of like let it fall into disrepair and then have a hero moment where we fix it, once every year we go and spend 3 weeks fixing it. If we give it its ongoing maintenance, I think that if I was personally responsible for doing the ongoing maintenance of the thing, I would just like not do it, because it would not be like ever urgent.
Right.
The calendar, I could put a calendar note that says like, go, do the service upkeep. And I would also not do it because the calendar reminder would never be something where if I did it, tomorrow instead, I would, observe nothing.
Who cares?
It's like it lacks the urgency. But if the two of us have the same calendar invite, it's a little bit like having a personal trainer. Maybe that's the right metaphor. It's like
that's what
trainer.
I was thinking about.
Yeah. So Alec and I are each other's personal trainers when it comes to this project, where we meet, we hack on this thing, we keep it in shape. And the point of the meeting is sort of just to keep ourselves honest about the sort of like the ongoing level of maintenance of that this thing needs. That's the metaphor. Yeah, personal trainer. Whereas like what you can't do is you can't eat donuts and hot dogs all year and then in June say, oh, it's bathing suit season, I need to go and get ripped. You have to do it continuously for it to be healthy. I feel like that's sort of to torture my metaphor, I think that's how this service works.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, just speaking from personal experience, I've been training for a race, and when I hired a coach to kind of help me do it, and every person that I told that to said, "Why aren't you just using ChatGPT or Claude for this? Like, shouldn't clearly they would know better." Or would be able to serve the same purpose. It's like, well, my coach is not that expensive, and having a real human who I have this like sort of social responsibility to or pride in representing myself to, shifts my behavior in a way that I would never behave with ChatGPT or Claude. Like if it told me to do something and I didn't do it, I would feel zero amount of guilt about that. But if this person who I'm building a relationship with, who I want help from, like suggests and we agree that it is worth doing this thing, and then I don't do it, I have this guilt and discomfort that I want to avoid.
You're accountable.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of the point. And so that definitely speaks to me. I want to shift gears a little bit to that other topic, which is this difference between scheduled and unscheduled time, because I've heard you say previously that actually in many ways scheduled meetings are the most insidious type of interruption, where most people actually think of a scheduled meeting as no interruption at all. It's scheduled. We know about it ahead of time. So of course it's not an interruption. And so why do you think scheduled meetings are interruptions, and why can they be so insidious?
So I should say this is my admission. I like get into, I'm writing code, I'm solving the problem, and I do the flow state thing, and time stops happening for me. And, 2 hours later, I'm done, and I've like basically loaded all the context into the brain, done all the work, and I just absolutely love the sort of long, working sessions. And I find that if I have my calendar sliced up into like half-hour chunks, I have so much difficulty sort of loading in the context and starting working on something. I want to be able to say, I can solve this entire problem in one session. And I find that when, it's some difficult programming task, or when I have to like write a important doc or something, I want to be able to sit down and get that first draft done or get that first pull request done. And as soon as my time slices get too small, I lose confidence that I can solve the whole problem, and I end up solving shallow, dumber problems. And so maybe it's not so much like having scheduled things as difficult, but I do find that like I want lots of big open-ended time where I can crack my knuckles and go like deep on something. But like scheduled things aren't bad on their own, but what happens in big company is you say we're gonna have a scheduled status meeting every day at 10:30 in the morning, and it's like, oh, that's devastating, because that means that I start work around 9-ish, can't get anything that deep done in 90 minutes, and then probably can't get anything done after for lunch or something. So it's like I want to have those scheduled meetings, but I want to cluster them, and I really don't want to have them with interrupting my working time. Yeah. And I admit that this makes me sound like a complete hypocrite from like 10 minutes ago, where I'm talking about love being interrupted, but when I get that interruption is not scheduled, and so it didn't prevent me from like trying to solve the problem. Right? Like if I'm sitting down, I'm like, I can go solve this thing. If I know I'm going to be interrupted, I won't like get into that headspace. Whereas if somebody messages me and says, hey, elbows me, I will absolutely say, go away. I'll get you later when I have the cycles for it. But often what happens is it's like, oh, that thing that I set aside 3 hours to do took 25 minutes, because once you have the mental space for it, problems solve themselves.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that you said that stood out to me. One is that the scheduled meetings, it's not so much that they're bad in them of themselves, but knowing that they're coming, the anticipation and the certainty of their presence almost precludes you from ever starting the most meaningful work, because you don't have certainty that you could finish the meaningful work before that thing starts. Whereas if it's totally open-ended, it's like, oh, well, like I don't know if this is going to take 90 minutes or 2.5 hours or 4.5 hours, but it's definitely not going to take 8. And so, I can get it done today. But when you have that meeting, it starts to mess with that equation. So it stops you from even starting. And then you prioritize maybe the less important stuff as a consequence. But the ad hoc interruption gives you the chance to make a snap decision. Do I do this or not? You have no obligation to say yes. And so even if you do say yes, it doesn't matter because you got started on the most important thing anyway, and maybe you finished it sooner than you thought. Am I hearing that right?
You got it exactly right. Like the interruptions are optional, right? Yeah.
But the scheduled meeting is required. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so going to meetings themselves, we were having a pre-interview ahead of this conversation, and it was kind of funny because you said to me, this type of face-to-face meeting is totally wrong. And it threw me off guard a little bit because you and I have never talked live, and I was sort of like, oh god, this pre-interview is not going well. And you started to share a little bit more about your point of view, but we held the conversation for the podcast. Yeah. So, why do you want a whiteboard in every meeting, and what does that have to do with what I'm talking about here?
All right. So I should admit, like this specific conversation is fun, but in general, I have this. I have this thing where a lot of the times we'll have a working meeting where we have some shared objective. And the shared objective will be like, figure out the new transaction API to make something idempotent or something. And we have to like make decisions, consider some trade-offs or whatever, and maybe like do some research together or something. But there's like effectively like an artifact that we will produce from collaborating. And so I find that like we need a place for that artifact to grow. And that artifact, like a whiteboard is a great place for it. A text file is a great place for it. Even just like make a Google Doc where you both have cursors in it, you're both typing stuff wildly. Just a place where we can put down all of the questions that we have that we want to answer, and maybe all of the decisions that we make or the answers that we discover. And what, again, I'm going to use my sort of like video gaming metaphor, is like, as soon as you have that piece of paper or whiteboard or Google Doc or something, it feels like a multiplayer game where we have a shared objective, and our objective is to produce an artifact, which might be, again, a whiteboard that we don't even take a picture of, but just like some artifact that says this is the decision was made. As soon as we have that thing that we're collaborating on, we are teammates that are building something together. And what I find is that without that thing, without that document or whiteboard or whatever, instead we focus on each other's faces and each other's facial reactions and responses. And so I'm like saying like, hey, how should this thing work? And then you're like squinting or frowning or looking grumpy or looking up surprised. And a lot of my attention is not attempting to like yield them the artifact of the decision, but instead to basically like keep you happy. And so my metaphor of this is like, we have some decision, and I'll say there's there's 3 bad options, right? And so if I say, let's do the thing where we take the shortcut and there's going to be a lot of ongoing maintenance, you're like frowning, and I'm like, okay, frowning, we definitely don't want to do that one. And I say, okay, what about the one where we do this thing that's going to take 6 months? And then I see you and you like look worried. I'm like, okay, worried, that's not a choice. And the whole meeting just feels bad. Whereas if I write the 3 choices on a whiteboard and we like write pros and cons underneath, then we're evaluating sort of like the artifact, not each other's faces and reactions, and it's not about our tone. And so even in like very personal meetings where I'm talking to my lead about like, I've got some performance goals that I want to meet this quarter, or like what does it take to get this person promoted? If I say like, what does it take to get this person promoted, and we're just looking at each other in the face, it feels like confrontational, and I got a lot of social anxiety. Whereas if I get a doc and I'm like, get Jill promoted, right? And it's like, what is Jill's weaknesses, what are her strengths. We can like write in there, and at no point do I feel like the bad guy by being like Jill's garbage at responding on Slack or something. Whereas if I say that and it's like this face-to-face thing, I'm like, what do you think about how Jill responds on Slack? So,
yeah, that's fascinating. So by creating the artifact and putting the focus on the artifact, it no longer becomes this dance around pleasing each other, and instead becomes really centered around the objective at hand. Like, why are we here? What are we trying to accomplish? What is the artifact we're trying to produce, decision we're trying to make, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, that's really insightful. I've definitely experienced the same thing subconsciously, and not been able to put a finger on as to why different conversations have felt crummy versus good. And it's totally this thing. So you've unlocked an understanding in my brain that I didn't have previously. What do you typically use for that? Like, what's your weapon of choice for that?
So I love to just open any text editor, text edit on macOS or whatever. Text editor is particularly good because the only real like shouting you can do is putting things in uppercase. So you say like problems uppercase, and then you write a bunch of things. Anything collaborative, like either we're sharing a text editor on one person's computer with Tuple, or we're using a Google Doc or something. It doesn't have to be particularly high fidelity. I think even more high fidelity, suddenly I start to think about like, let's change the format of the fonts and stuff. The other thing that like fits is if you start out by saying like, here in this meeting, we're going to, make a decision on X and Y. You can like write your notes and then like effectively like put like X's on bad ideas or whatever. When you come with a decision, then you end the meeting. And I find that when it's like a face-to-face meeting, we discuss it and then we go until the scheduled time of the meeting is up. So if we have an hour to discuss a thing, we will go for the hour. Whereas if I like write the place where this artifact is going to land, as soon as we can see it, it's like, oh, we're done. And like the fact that we're done doesn't feel like I'm dismissing you and being like, all right, I've got what I need from you. Goodbye. So.
Yeah, that's a great pointer. So, step one, introduce in all meetings where you're trying to accomplish a specific thing, which is hopefully most, if not all. Have some sort of like separate artifact that the focus can be placed on instead of just the reactions. I think the reactions, being able to see how people react, is important, but you don't want it to be the centerpiece, right? You want the centerpiece to be this other thing. With that other thing, start by documenting or kind of writing, hey, this is the goal, this is what we're trying to accomplish, the decision we're trying to make, et cetera. And then by doing that, as you go through and jot things down, you realize, okay, we're done. We accomplished the thing, and that just ends the meeting at whatever amount of time is allotted.
And then to copy paste it, send it to everybody, and we win.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that's quite powerful. I have some rapid fire wrap ups. That we could jump to now, which I think could be interesting. What's your favorite tool, physical, digital, or otherwise, for improving your own productivity or joy from the work?
I started using a to-do list several years ago, and it took all of my what am I worried about stress and put it in the tool. And so it's like, wife says, go, pick up bread at the market, put it in the to-do list, and then I don't think about it for the rest of the day, and it's wonderful.
Do you love your particular app? Is it worth mentioning?
I use Todoist. Anything that can be like synced between my phone and my computer is probably sufficient. Todoist is great because it starts out incredibly simple. You just like type items and check them off, but it gets very powerful as you grow with it.
Yeah, that's nice. And it sounds like you use it both personally and professionally, which I think is part of the key. What's one question about remote work that you don't feel like you have the answer to yet?
Mentorship. I think that in office, you can see the juniors struggling and you can go and give them help. And if you're a junior and you're struggling in office, you can like go find a person and they can help you. I think remotely, again, being able to elbow your coworkers and say, hey, can you help me is like a cultural thing we need to build.
Yeah, I fully agree. Who's a technologist, developer, or otherwise, who you've been paying more attention to lately, and why?
The developer of a software app called NetNewsWire for Mac is Brent Simmons. and he's had some good banger blog posts lately. I really enjoy his posts. He was recently talking about how building apps is too damn hard, and I fully agree.
Very nice. I'll find his blog and link it in the reference. Do you know the website off the top of your head to share now?
Inessential.com.
Cool. Inessential.com. We'll link it for folks as well, but it's always nice to say it. Well, Jesse, that wraps things up. Thank you so much for being generous with your time and perspective. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. And if folks want to learn more about you or your work, where should they go?
I'm on publicobject.com is my blog.
Yeah, it's riddled with thoughtful pieces, some very technical, some not. And so strongly endorse that as well. Well, thank you again, Jesse. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Distributed. If you want to learn more about what we covered in this episode, or if you want to share your own thoughts, follow @Tuple on X or visit distributed.fm.